Let's just quickly get started. I'm going to begin with Kiran. So it's going to be like this. I'm going to talk to my panelists about the specific books they've written, and I'll open the floor for questions a little later. I request that you be prepared with your questions. Please write it down if you have to. And please don't waste time with observations and stuff. Just keep it succinct, okay? All right, Kiran, first of all, congratulations on your beautiful new book. I read it in one sitting. It's been a while since I read a book and I was that engrossed in it. Congratulations. Be sure to buy copies of her book and show the book a lot of love. It deserves it. Kiran's book has three fascinating women. I'll let Kiran tell you more about them. They're blessed with the light. There's this inner light which makes them glow. And they are pursued by forces of darkness. So what I want to ask Kiran is, so when you're talking about women who are as awesome as your protagonists, and they kick ass, by the way, one of them actually, it's a minor spoiler, but one of them is a killer, okay? And she's amazing. You'll fall in love with her, trust me. So Kiran, when you're as badass as that, is it like your lot to have the forces of darkness, the hounds of hell pursue you?
So thanks, Anuja, for all the kind words about my book. And hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm glad to see we still have a crowd after William Dalrymple. Thank you for being here. About the women in my book, yeah, they're kick-ass. They're everything I wish I could be. And yes, when you have the light, you also have the darkness. The darkness is always there. It's the light that interrupts the darkness, right? So wherever there is light, it will be surrounded by darkness waiting to take it over. Because even if you look at creation, at cosmos, lights are just speckles in the entire vacuum. So that's what these women are. They are little specks of light in the darkness. And about the hounds of hell, well, anything that's good is always pursued, right?
Nice. And my next question is for Hari.
I can't hear you.
I'm not at all tech savvy, as my daughters keep pointing out, but my next question is for Hari. Hari has two books out this year. One is Deva and the other one is Dakini. So these people will give you a complex because they're all overachievers out here. And Hari's Deva, I think you will find it interesting because I'm sure, how many of you watched Kantara, the pan-Indian blockbuster? Yes, and I think we loved the movie, and especially Guliga and Panjurli. So Hari, in his Deva, he's given so much amazing background for Tulu folklore, and it's a very personal, beautiful exploration of the subject. And his Dakini is about a very, very fascinating protagonist. And again, here we see the forces of light and darkness at play. So my question for Hari is, could you tell us, because we haven't had a fill of Kantara, and I was hoping you tell us a little bit more about Guliga and Panjurli. I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
You're pronouncing it absolutely correct. First of all, thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for staying back. And first of all, Daiva, more than Panjurli and Goliga, it was a personal exploration, like you mentioned. It's more like a memoir. It's not an academic research or anything like that. It's me. I am somebody I'm a diasporic Tuluva or I'm a diasporic Malayali, because my ancestors, they moved from the Tulu-speaking part of Karnataka to Kerala. Most of my relatives in my generation, they don't even remember the language. They speak in Malayalam. And those who have moved out, they speak whatever language, in Hindi or English or whatever. So for me, I wanted to understand what my ancestors worshipped. And I had this thing way before Kantara, but I think Kantara kind of triggered something, okay? And to be honest, I was working on Dakini at that time. And after watching Kantara, suddenly there was this boom, and my wife comes from the region. She's a proper person from the Tulu region. She speaks Kannada and everything. So she knew a lot about it, and somewhere I think it's her influence that pushed me to go on this quest. Okay. And Panjurli and Goliga have been made famous. They're already famous. Okay. Kantara kind of took it to a pan-India or even it crossed that Tulu Nadu region. But otherwise, they are two of the most popular deities of the region. They don't need my book, right? But the thing is, when I heard the story of Panjurli, because when I watched Kantara, Panjurli was the main deity, and in the climax, Rishabh is possessed by Guliga, who is kind of somebody, a deity who, Panjurli is a dharma daiva, somebody who deals with justice, okay? While Guliga is somebody who, the story is like there was a time when, so this story is related to Markandeya. When Markandeya, he had this boon that he'll live until the age of 16 and then he'll be taken by Yama. Okay, so when the god of death sends his messenger, he clings on to the Shivalinga and he's not able to take him. So Yama himself comes down with his lasso. He tries to, which is the weapon of death, tries to take Markandeya's soul to Yamaloka. At that time, Shiva gets very angry. He appears there and he presses his thumb. I mean, he kills Yama. And for a long time, there is no death on earth. Okay? And when Shiva presses his thumb on the earth, from there, a deity rises called. This is one of the stories. Because I have heard a very similar story about Kalaratri in the north. There, it's not Guluga, it's Kalaratri, who's coming out from this anger. And then he becomes the god of death. And Gulika also happens to be mentioned as one of the Ashtanagas as Kulika. So, and even in Kerala, if you go southwards to Kannur and all these regions, you've got Teyyam of Guligan. So somewhere there are multiple versions of Gulika, but all these versions are point to one similar finding, which is that Gulika is a very fierce deity. It's got a lot of raw energy. Again, the gender thing is something that has been passed down, but we cannot really say. This Goliga is somebody who came out of the mother's breast. That's another folklore. Because there's no way to authenticate or validate which one is the correct version. There's always the assimilation part that plays a role. There's a folk tale, because these were never written down, right? So Kuliga is somewhere who's worshipped outside the house, and someone very fearsome who doesn't he doesn't have the patience to wait for the judging and all. He just goes out and does the justice, which is what you see in that movie as well. Very beautifully done. Panjurli, again, another famous deity who is the boar spirit. Anthropologists believe that this came from the fear of boars who would come and destroy crops, and because of that the boar became the totem. But again, Vaishnava traditions link it with Vishnu. Shaiva traditions link it with Shiva. So yeah, these are the fascinating. This is some of the fascinating deities. There are a lot of deities like Kalluruti, Kalkuda, and they're not even related to the Puranic gods. Right. So yeah, that's Daiva. And if you want to know more, again, if you want to scratch that surface, Daiva is there. But beyond that, I think there's another panel going on Tulu oral literature here. They should definitely check it out.
So thanks, Hari. And getting to Shabbeer's book, the session is on fantastic beasts, but I think he has fantastic beasts in his book, the manticores and the gus whale and the simurgh. But I thought the most fantastic beast was his protagonist, Rusbe, the most unheroic hero you'll ever find. And the things he does in the name of love, within quotes, nothing more shocking or hateful. So why don't you tell me about the fantastic beasts right in your book?
Thank you so much. It's surprising that my book is called Jinns and Kings. You're not scared of the jinns, and you're scared about my protagonist. You find him scary. Let me talk about love. This book explores the concept of love. Like Rumi says, everything else about love. Everything else is just humbug, whatever, it's just an add-on in life. Now, you know what? In my opinion, great crimes or greater crimes have been committed in the name of love than hatred. people profess love, you know, for their loved ones or for the country or, you know, for some value or the culture, and using that as an excuse, they perpetrate great crimes on people who are in love with their own people, with their own soil and their own culture, right? So what really are we doing? So anyway, so let's talk about my character that you said is really anti-hero. Now, the protagonist is a great man. And there's a distinct difference between goodness and greatness. You look at the Greek tragedies, right? Was Achilles great? He was. Was he a good man? I don't know. Right? You look at the prophets, you look at Solomon, he was great. He was. Was he good? Still good, yes. But that's the concept. Now, this book draws from a number of sources. The Ruspe, who's the lead character in my story, kills his own son. And that draws directly from Rustam and Sohrab. This book heavily draws from the Shahnameh, which Ferdowsi wrote. And yes, and there are a number of things that I've taken from the Iliad, the Odyssey, and it reflects what we see around. You look at the Turkic kings, you look at the Mughal kings, they always had a problem with their children, right? So there is only one way, either you survive or somebody more powerful survives. So this book explores the concept of goodness versus greatness, and my character might not be good, but he definitely was a great man.
Oh, that's very nicely put. But I think it's a way of saying that ultimately it's a celebration of the male ego. We call it great because whether the man is little or good or whatever, his ego remains great. Yeah?
Okay, let's talk about that as well. Thank you. I mean, I finally see some smiles and smirks. Now, I can hear you say mentally, get out of that one now. Okay. No, I think we as humans are just not black and white. We're in different shades of gray. It's if what we have done outweighs in quantum, it outweighs the bad that we have done and heavily outweighs it. We consider it great. I do not know why our characters should be good and great. I mean, is that normal? Is that right? Ask his wife. Is he actually a good man? He may not be, but to the outside world, he's a great man. Right? It depends on the quantum of work that you've done, and I'm sure you've done something wrong as well. And right and wrong itself is an abstract concept. Wrong according to you might not be that big a wrong according to somebody else compared to the good that you've done. So I think that's where I stand.
Okay, fair enough. I agree that a man need not be reduced to the sum of his worst deed. But moving on, one thing, although all three have written in the fantasy genre and they've covered a diverse range of subjects, I was surprised at how much all three books had in common. So let's spice things up and talk about the sex in all their books. Okay, all three, I said sex, but there's more than that. You know, all three have touched on the subject of rape. And I noticed that Kiran, though she did a deep dive into rape and, the crimes committed against women without their consent, her book was extremely sex positive, very empowering. It's seriously erotically charged and excellent. The two, Hari and Shabbeer, have also delved into it with great depth, but I couldn't help but notice that in your books, in Dakini, Hari writes with a lot of empathy for the oppressed, for the minority communities. He writes with a lot of sensitivity. So I'm not making this a gender issue, but I'm just saying that I noticed that over here, in both your books, a woman's body becomes a battlefield for the male bias, for the male ego, for male pride. So how would you respond to that? I'll start with Kiran, and I want all of you to address my observation on your books.
Want me to take that first?
You start.
About the female body being a battlefield for the male gaze, pride, ownership, whatever you may call it, that is something that has been going on for centuries, Anuja. That has been on. How do I respond to it differently? I inhabit a female body. I would respond to it differently. My responses, my my reaction to the male gaze, to this idea of ownership, consent would be different because I own my body. It is not a battlefield or a battleground for anybody. Therefore, I think the way I react and respond and the way my characters by extension, it's not necessarily that I am my characters or I inhabit my characters, but I think they would react differently because they would also have a certain amount of ownership and agency of their own bodies. And these are not women that I wanted to portray as victims, as resigned to their circumstances, as unable to take control of situations they've been thrust into, whether it is situations they're running away from or whether it is situations where they are forced into a certain relations which they are not agreeable to, or whatever it is. I mean, with one it is a human, with another it is a creature who takes possession of her against her consent. And the creature takes complete ownership of her physically, sexually, in every way. But she is trying to get away from the creature, right? And she can acknowledge it for what it is. So that boundary of acknowledging and crossing it into battling for yourself is what I wanted to portray. But without it becoming the leitmotif of the entire book. It is not a battle, it is a journey. That was why I think my women are a little different.
Hari, you want to go next and talk about where exactly you were coming from, especially in Dakini, with the horrors that befall pregnant women in his book.
So that particular aspect comes from a very personal experience. So see, Dakini has one rape scene. That's it. But that rape scene is very painful. But since you've read the story, you even give me a blurb for the story, you realize that the whole story happens because of a rape which happened 30 years ago, right? So I don't know if I can answer about the male ego, but I can say that Dakini, that particular story is about, I think it's weaponizing sex. Sex is used as a weapon. Should I use the word patriarchy here? I don't know. I may be wrong. I might be incorrect. I don't know. But sex has been used as a weapon to completely send this woman to a dark corner. And once she enters that dark corner, she is labeled as a witch. It was no mistake of hers. She did not give, nobody even asked for her consent. The matter of consent is, it's not pleasure. It cannot be sex positive. That experience cannot be sex positive, right? Nobody even gives a damn about this woman's consent because those men are very powerful, right? So I think with respect to Dakini, I had to take that path because that was right for the book. As an individual, I may have been wrong, but for that story, I think that was the right thing. For that character, that was the right thing. And that brought out something which, see, you, her, my mother, my wife, we are all very privileged. All those who are sitting here, we are very privileged. Dakini is not the story of a privileged woman. She is somebody who is residing in an Adivasi village, who does not have access to phones or anything at all. Despite being a matrilineal community, they have been forced to follow the patrilineal this thing. If you read the book carefully, all those things are mentioned here and there. So I think with respect to Dakini, sex has been used as a weapon by the man or patriarchy.
Shabbeer, in your book
Yes.
also, rape, sex has been weaponized
That's
by
right.
the protagonist here, the hero.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I want to make one thing clear. If you watch Disclosure, you watch Michael Douglas, Demi Moore's, you find it very clear that any form of sexual exploitation or sexual harassment is not about sex. It's about power. Right? So it is not specific to a gender. If you think you're powerful and you can get away with it, okay, You get it. You get to do that, right? Not necessary if you're good. So in my book, Rusbe threatens a kingdom and he says, I will conquer your kingdom, I will burn your houses down, I will rape your princes. It's a threat. Surrender. And they don't, and when they fight finally and they lose, right, he has to follow up on his threat. That's how the medieval world worked. It worked on fear. That's how the Mongols worked, right? They threatened, if you don't surrender, they burnt your cities, they raped your women, and just reflects the times and the mentality that was prevalent at the time, yes.
Thank you. And another thing, a common thread running through the narrative of all your books, Fantastic Beasts, of course, they are featured. But I thought that it was interesting that though there are dangerous beasts to be contended with, the monsters in your protagonist's heads were the scariest ones. And it's hard to fight the monsters in your head because in a way you're feeding that monster yourself. I thought all the rage within these protagonists, especially Kiran's Noor. There's a very wonderful character called Noor who's practically a goddess. And yet, while there's a part of her that embraces that power, there's a part of her that actively suppresses her own shine, her light, her sparkle, because she's feeding those monsters. I thought it was super kinky, the way that BDSM twist was there in all your books. Again, it's weird that you all have touched on such different topics, and this was that common thread I noticed. So, Kiran, how do we defeat the monsters in our head?
Do we want to defeat the monsters in our head?
There's the kink.
Why should we defeat the monsters in our head? They're part of us. There's the dark and there's the light. And all of this together is what makes us, right? Yes, if you live in a society, if the monsters are going to be out there and causing havoc and doing things that are not acceptable to another person, then we need to defeat them. But if the monsters are harmless little monsters in your head, let them be. But coming to Noor, she's a fallen angel. And Noor came about when I read the stories about, in the Old Testament, about how the angels of God had fallen on earth and succumbed to the pleasures of the flesh with the women, the human women. I said, these are all male angels. Where are the women out here? I know that Lilith existed. Eve was a goody-goody wife. Lilith was the woman who's, the first woman who said that I will not lay beneath Adam. I am equal to Adam, and she was cast out of Eden. I said, where are the female angels? That's how Noor came about. And Noor is very unabashed in her desire. She is accepting of this darkness in her that needs to be constantly satiated. Does she want to get rid of it? I don't think she wants to get rid of it. She has accepted it. She is exhausted of the running away from whatever chases her. So I think we live, all of us, with two very disparate sides of ourselves. One which the world sees, one which the world does not see. And to pretend that the other doesn't exist is doing a disservice to ourselves. And I think that my protagonists reflect that.
So the thing to be noticed here is that authors are also dangerous beasts. They keep the monsters inside and outside alive because it's all fodder for the creative mill, and that's how they write these amazing stories. So now you know our secret.
So don't cross us. We'll write you down and kill you in our books.
Yeah, we'll use everything, and the darker the better. And hurry, getting to Dakini. Let's talk about Dakini again. And you, last time you raised a very valid point where you mentioned that we are all extremely privileged. We sit in our armchairs and we wax eloquent with like-minded people, whereas you've chosen to tell the stories of the marginalized. I noticed that in Daiva, where you talked about untouchability and the ramifications of it. And in Dakini, you mentioned tribal women who don't have access to a better life. And again, out here, I noticed that in Kiran's case with Noor, she feeds the monster. In your case, I noticed that personal trauma and tragedy, they are the dark monster she's fighting, and they need to be exorcised. So how did your character, Mamta, how did she find what she needed to defeat the monsters and claim herself from them?
If I answer that, then a lot of people will understand what's the climax, but I will answer.
Just give them
Yeah,
enough so that they'll want more and they'll run
She
and buy your book.
mentioned that there is darkness and light, right? I feel that if you have, see again, she is taking that side where the light is positive and the dark is negative. I don't believe that. No, I mean, that's the way it that's the way it sounded. But the thing is, that's how we all assume. Even if I have to assume, light is like the good thing. Like in Brahmastra, they used it. The light hota hai, whatever it was. The dark is the dark side or the negative side. Okay. I feel that we have to embrace the darkness. If we have always lived in the light or in a privileged kind of way, then we may never see that what pain can do to you. So if you look at Dakini, if you look at Mamata Matthews, who is my protagonist, she had gone through a very traumatic episode of losing a baby, which I think for anyone, any individual who wants to be a mother, that is one of the most traumatizing episode in their life. At least for my protagonist, it was, because it was inspired from somebody whom I knew very well. Okay, and but when she comes to this village and she sees somebody who is almost going to see the same fate, but in a totally unprivileged condition, and she has a way to save her, that gives her that light. I think that's the way I look at it. Trauma always, because I am somebody who has gone through a lot of trauma in life. So, I mean, different times in life, something happens and I go into a trauma. And then I come up with something which brings me out of it. And maybe that's why if you have read Dakma, even there you will find marital isolation as the subject, which have kind of marital isolation in an urban setup, where the husband is working and the wife has to sit at home. So that's there. But she's also going through a lot of trauma because of something that happened to her during her childhood. So in Dakini, it's a little different. The darkness, it's kind of, here's where she embraces the darkness. And it's only when she goes into the darkness. Now, the darkness, the aspect is I go into a concept called shunyata. Shunyata, when it comes to mythology, the concept of shunyata is where there is nothing. Okay, and Dakini is somebody who rules over the shunyata, at least according to the Vajrayana philosophy. That's how it is, and that's the reason why my main character occasionally goes into that dark zone, which is literally shown there. If you remember, there's a shunyata where she goes when she has those hallucinations and dreams. So that's the literal representation of that. But that's that.
Actually, I think both of you have pretty much put it across the same way, because even here in her book, it's not light versus darkness, because darkness is kind to desire, and this book was all about celebrating desire.
I wasn't really talking about her book. I was saying in general, when we say light and dark, it's always good versus bad. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Even if you have to take Ramayana, it's always looked upon as good versus evil. Right?
It's a very simplistic way of looking at it. Okay, fair enough. And Shabbeer, your world is also not a very cut and dried world with your good guys in this corner, because you pointed it out. We all have a certain inner beast which gets unleashed with abandon here. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the motivations, the inner workings of your characters, because powerful though they were in the book, they were defined by their weaknesses, whether it was for power, whether it was for magic, whatever. So would you want to elaborate on that?
Absolutely. The various characters in my book, so there's Roosbay. And Roosbay is an orphan. And he goes on a quest, and he comes across this jinn. You know, we have this concept of jinn as somebody inside a lamp. You rub the lamp, the genie comes out, gives you wishes. Yes, that's a jinn as well. But there are diverse forms of jinns. And one of the jinn is a marid. The marids live inside the ocean in the form of a giant whale or a giant creature. As a matter of fact, the behemoth is considered to be a marid. So he comes across this marid, and helps it, rescues it, does some favor. And what this married, who's in a form of a whale, it's called the Gus whale, gives him something called the Gus ambergris. And when he ingests that Gus ambergris, he's destined for kingship. Now here's an orphan. He's led a tough life. He's on his way to be a hero. And he's going on a journey. He's doing great acts, feats, etc. But his base nature does not leave him. Now and then, there's a tug between good and evil, and he has to fight not only for kingship, but also for his soul. There are certain decisions that he takes that is not good. I'm sure when you read that book, you'd ask yourself, would you do this in his place? Right? We always have a decision to make. Right? So, would I be good, and at what cost? If I'm good, would I still remain king? Right? They are the children, but the children are born privileged. They can afford to be good and not lose anything. Right? So you look at how you think. Your thought stems from your position where you are and where you come from. Right? And there is also a mage, stepdaughter, Darya. And of course, there are a number of creatures as well. And these creatures are sentient creatures. There is a manticores, there's a sea murg, and there are centaurs, and a lot of creatures in this book. And each of them have their own thoughts. And they do what they have to do because they're placed in that particular situation. So I think we're pushed into a situation. And you make your decision based on where you come from and where you want to go. And I think it's free will ultimately. It's a decision that you make makes you who you are.
I have so many more amazing questions for my amazing panelists, but I think I'll open up the floor for questions now. Yes, and could we please give them a mic? Are there volunteers here? So please keep your questions concise. We have a little time left, so let's be a little, yeah. Okay.
We take, in a book, content stuff as 100. Can an author give a breakup of that 100 into own experience and perception? Perception without experience. Perception from newspaper and what's happening in the society. Then other interpretation, other authors.
So you'll have to ask your question
and
address it to
how a book is arrived at. Maybe, the way they are talking, it looks like their own perception and their own, how it will reach, how it will be compatible. That's why I'm asking,
so
how relevant it is,
whether it
is derived from their own experience, their own perception, it is not compatible with.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
You know what? I think we put a little bit of ourselves into the book every time. I think everybody does that. Our experiences, our exposure makes up for the book as well, yes. Of course we imagine, of course we seek inspiration, but there is always a little bit of you, what you've been exposed to, and the experiences that you've been defined the characters in the book as well.
Good evening, everyone. Excellent session. So my question is to Kiran ma'am. So how do you feel as a women writer who writes about women? How do you feel when men write women in that such deep conviction and philosophy that they fight very fiercely in their books? They write about women so much as they experience that as a woman. But how do you feel as a woman?
I can't hear you too well.
Sorry. How do you feel as a woman writer about men who write about women in such deep conviction and philosophy, like how they live the life? But I'm sure it's just somewhere around, it's just empathy. They empathize with other women, or they empathize the situations that they are seen in, and might be a little bit of research. But do you think that they'll ever be able to capture a woman as much as a woman writer who's possibly experienced or co-experienced events?
That's a lovely question, and I think we have Madame Bovary, we have Anna Karenina, which were all written by male writers, and I think they were very deeply sensitive portraits of women. I feel as long as it's done with empathy and respect, it's fine. But the moment you start objectifying, that's where, my shutters come down, because sometimes I do see that happening. And well, to each their own. It depends on the genre, it depends on the kind of, whether it's commercial fiction, literary fiction. I'm not going to expect a James Bond to have a sensitively written woman. So it's completely subjective to the kind of kind of book that it is.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Hey, hi everyone. Hi. This is a question to the all three of you. I want to know that everyone here is sitting and listening to you, about your great stories and how you came about writing it. Can you tell us, like, why would you want a reader to pick up your book, and if there is something you probably want them to take away? Or you can leave the second part, because if you want them to form their own minds, right? But yeah, I mean, why would you want a reader to pick your book? And second, if at all, is there anything you want to relay? Yeah.
I'll take the question first. You know what? If you read Harry Potter, if you read Lord of the Rings, how many more dragons would you want to read more about? So in my book, I've got a lot of these creatures that are very much, they belong to the East. Like, for example, I have the sea morgue. I have the manticores. By the way, anybody, can you tell me where the manticores are from? Anybody? Where are the manticores from? Which mythology? You heard of the manticore? Wrong. Anybody? Greece. Wrong. Do you know, actually, apparently the Greeks, there was this man called Theseus, and he was a physician to the Achaemenid Empire. And he said, there's a creature called the manticore, which has the face of a human being, the body of a lion, and, surprise, surprise, it is from India. It roams around in the Indian forest. It's afraid of the elephant. And he spread that in the Persian court. So the Persians and the Greeks believed that manticore, or rather manticoras, marticoras, as the Greeks called, was from India. So, hey, I want to write more about the creatures of the East and manticores. I want to write about the sea murg, a very, very beautiful bird. I don't think I have the time to describe the sea murg and why it is what it is. I want to write about a number of creatures, especially the serpopard, which is also from Egypt and all that. So I want to write more about the creatures from the Orient rather than exploring from the Occident. You would not believe it. Even the centaur, which is highly depicted in the West, originated from, would you believe it, Iran. Okay, the earliest form of centaurs are shown out there in the Mesopotamian culture. So I want to talk a lot more about these creatures. So in case you want to explore some more of the same, and with a very different angle, you must read my book. It's called The Jinns and Kings. Thank you.
Why should anyone pick up my book? It depends on what is your taste. Because if it's somebody who wants to pick up Daiva, then it has to be someone who either has loved Kantara and wants to know more about that specific form of folk religion, which is now kind of assimilated into the mainstream religion. That's how religions evolve. But otherwise, if you are somebody who is a diasporic Tuluva, or even a diasporic South Indian for that matter, who is kind of disconnected from your roots, then I think Daiva is a book that you should definitely pick up. The first part is my journey trying to find out my roots. The second part is obviously folk tales. And some of these folk tales are, see again, if you are someone from the region who believes in these deities, then it's almost like a Puran for you, right? Otherwise, these are fascinating tales with fantastic deities. I won't use the term beasts here, it's disrespectful. I'm sorry. For somebody who's an outsider, it might be creatures or whatever, but for people from the region, they worship them. Many of them worship them, so they are venerated. Therefore, they are fantastic spirit deities. So that's Daiva, non-fiction, my first work of non-fiction. Again, it's mythology, but regional mythology and folklore. That's a genre that not a lot of writers explore, because mostly when it comes to mythology, mainstream writers go with the well-known figures from the Puranas, right? And I mean, that's how it is. Those things sell well. Now coming to Dakini, or Dakma, which is like a prelude to Dakini. Both of them happen in the same universe. Dakma is my fifth book. Dakini is my 8th book. but both of them happen in the same universe. Both of them are female-centric stories. One takes place in a completely urban setup. So if you're somebody who likes to read horror and psychological thriller, which doesn't happen in this Khuni Haveli and Sunsan jungle, in the middle of nowhere. If you want to read a good horror or psychological thriller which is set in an urban landscape, please go for it, because the story happens in a well-lit apartment in the most posh area in Bombay called Malabar Hill, one of the most posh areas, right? And Dakini, again, it's a complete opposite. It's somebody from Malabar Hill going to an Adivasi village. That's it.
Kiran?
See, it's telling me time up. So I'm just going to say, please buy my books to increase my royalties. I need to make a living wage.
One last thing before we close. Since the topic is fantastic beasts and where to find them, if you find Newt's commander, tell Newt he was wrong. Manticore is not a Greek creature as they feature it in the WikiHow or Wiki fandom. Thank you so much.